Hello, welcome back. So every year we try to have a member of the OTP team come in and give an update. And this year, OTP code and Erlang are the background behind all of the languages that we're using. So the things that they do affect all of us. So I'd like to welcome Ingela. I think I said your name correctly. I'm trying to give us an update from the OTP team. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think you got it fairly right. It's Ingela. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with you from Stockholm, Sweden, to give you some news from the Erlang OTP team at Ericsson. I will start with some news about OTP 27 that was released in May last year. And then we will go on to OTP 28 that will be released in May this year. So one of the biggest or most visible things that we did in OTP 27 was process labels. So process labels are short descriptions that doesn't have to be unique, that you can associate with your processes. So if we take an example, we can look at some process listings here. And at the top, we have the OTP 26 process listing in our observer application. And you can see that we have a TLS sender process. That much we can deduce from looking at the function name that is initially called when the process is started. But we really don't know much about what this process is doing, if it's a client or if it's a server, or what it's connecting to, or if it has some user process, and what kind of process that is. But if we take a look at the bottom, in OTP 27, when we have used the process labels, we can now see that the TLS sender is a client, and it's connected to www.erlang.org. And also we can see it has a user process that's implementing HTTPS and not LDAP, for instance. So we are increasing the observability of our system in a really nice way. And these labels will show up in crash reports and in Erlang crash dumps too. And of course, you can have your own process labels that you associate with your own processes to increase the observability even more. When it comes to the documentation, we ditched our old documentation format that was XML, and we replaced it with Markdown. And as you can see, we now have a much nicer look and feel and more modern of our documentation. And also we have restructured a lot of the content and enhanced it in other ways. But the intent is also that it should be easier to contribute to our documentation. So if you feel that it needs improving somewhere, you're welcome to make a pull request. And here's a small example of how API documentation could look like with our newly supported triple quoted strings to make it easy to write multi-line comments in the code. We also introduced some new sigils to facilitate writing documentation strings. So you see example 1 and 2 here. We have binaries that are UTF-8 encoded is the default. And we also have example 3 and 4 to show you that you can have the output as a list of characters or a binary, and you don't have to use to verbose escaping. And if you want to know more details about these sigils, please have a look at our user guide. And the most popular open source contribution to OTP 27 was the JSON encoding decoding module that was contributed by Mihao at WhatsApp. So thank you very much, Mihao, for that contribution. And if you want to know more of the details of the OTP 27 release, you can have a look at our blog. So let's move on to OTP 28. In OTP 28, we're going to have something called nominal types. And these are types that are distinguished by user-defined names. So for instance, we could define the nominal types meter and foot, and they would both be compatible with the built-in type integer, but not compatible with each other. So if we in our program mix up meters and foots, Dialyzer is going to complain, which is a very good thing, because if we mix up meters and foots, we are going to get very strange results that might have disastrous consequences. We are also introducing something called SIP comprehensions, and SIP comprehensions was proposed a very long time ago, actually, like a decade ago or something or more in EEP 19. But since then, a lot of things happened to Erlang, so we had to write a new EEP. But the SIP comprehensions is the same suggestion in general. But so what is a SIP comprehension? And I would want to explain it by just first saying or telling you what a list comprehension is. So a list comprehension is a way to generate lists from a couple of generators. And then you take all the elements of the generators and you combine them in all possible ways. And then you get the Cartesian product. But if you have a SIP comprehension instead, and you take the elements from each generator and you zip them together so that you get a smaller result set. And we also introduced something called strict generators. So for normal list comprehensions, if you have an element in the generator that doesn't match the match expression of the comprehension, it will just be filtered out. But if you use a strict generator, you will now get a runtime error. Security is also, of course, something that we are always considering. And we are following closely the Cyber Resilience Act that the European Union is working on. And the US, of course, is working on similar things. And one of the things that we already have done because of this is that we have adopted private issues on GitHub. So if you think that you have found a vulnerability in our code base, you can tell us about it without telling the rest of the world. And then, of course, when we have a CV for it and the solution, it will be published through our CNA, which is GitHub at the moment. But in the future, probably the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation will become our CNA together with all the other Beam languages. So that's the plan, at least. When it comes to the SSL/TLS application, we have concentrated our efforts on the inner mechanisms of the application, doing refactors to improve code health and to improve the data flow, especially for TLS 1.3, but not exclusively. I can also mention two things in more detail. And one is that we avoid recreating the same term many times when we return the OPEC TLS socket to the API functions. And we also avoid some overhead by introducing some new crypto functions so that we don't have to do general initializations over and over again. And this, of course, improves our memory handling and improves the garbage collecting. So we produce less garbage and we decrease the CPU utilization this way, improving the green footprint of our application. And when it comes to running Erlang without the shell, we now have a new raw mode. And in this mode, it's possible to read keystrokes without the user having to press enter. And it will not be echoed to stand it out. So now you will be able to write your own terminal snake game in Erlang. And dynamic supervisors, we have decided that their progress reports will be on the bug level. So if you have lots of TLS connections going up and down, you will no longer be spammed by any progress reports. And we have a new API function for supervisors too, which is called which child. And this facilitates you to find the process IDs of your siblings under the same supervisor. Floating points can now be written in any base, and you have some examples of this here. Also, we have been working on introducing process iterators so that you can inspect all your processes in a more scalable way. And we have a new backend for the regex module that is now supported because the backend that we had was out of support. And Emacs mode will be handled multi-line string spectre. And if you want to use the C standard or the Z standard, I'm not sure how you want that to be pronounced, but that's a compression standard anyway. And if you're interested in using that, we have an API module for that. And last but not least, we have been introducing something called priority messages. And this is so that you can handle heavy load situations better, but it's not something that you will be using in your daily messages because then you are going to end up in starvation or other things or issues that you didn't want. So it should be used with care. And that was the highlights of OTP 28. Thank you so much for listening.
We have questions. Hopefully she can hear, otherwise.
Can you hear me? No?
Go ahead, ask and I'll go repeat it.
Okay. So I was wondering about the strict generators, if that's enabled, like, okay.
Just go stand behind the thing and talk to him. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
No, up here.
Okay, this side. Can you hear me?
Ingela, can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you.
So regarding the strict generators, is that a global
Yeah.
change or is it enabled by a feature?
Sorry, it's very low. What could you repeat that question?
Yeah.
So regarding the strict generators, is that a global change to all code or is it enabled by a feature, for example?
No, it's not the global change. So I can go back to here. So you see, normal is comprehension, just has an arrow. And if you want a strict generator, you have to put a colon in the arrow.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't see that from the back.
Yeah. so it's a new feature, and you only get it if you want it. So this could be useful if you are iterating over something where it's like you want everything to be in, you don't want to filter anything out, and it's an error if you have something that doesn't match.
Anybody else?
Yep.
Francesca, you.
Yeah. So, can you hear me, Ingela?
Yes, I can
Hi.
hear you.
So,
Hi.
hi. Sorry you couldn't make it in person, but hopefully next year.
Yeah, maybe.
I had a quick question. There's been a lot of really, really good cooperation with the general community. So, going beyond the airline community, but the Elixir community. I know you've got regular calls with WhatsApp. Could you maybe dwell a little bit into the changes which have come in, not because Ericsson actually needs the features, but because they've been maybe contributed by the community or encouraged by others?
Yeah, well, I mean, the SIP generators is not something that was from Ericsson. It was from the open source community, but as I said, a very long time ago. And then we didn't really have the time or to actually implement it, even if we didn't think it was a bad idea until now. So we wrote the second EEP, but that was just doing things to like say, okay, how is this working with maps, for instance, that didn't exist when the first EEP was written. So the basic functionality of SIP generators is the one that was suggested in EEP 19 by open source community. And surprisingly often, I think what Ericsson wants and what open source wants are the same things. But open source community is often more quick-footed, so Ericsson benefits, I think, from that.
Anybody else?
Uh,
Anybody? Nobody wants to get on stage? This is your chance. All right. Well, Ingela, thank you very much for your time and for sharing with us. We appreciate having you as always. Have a wonderful day.
It was nice coming. I hope that at least once I get to go to the US conference also. But yeah, I think it's since the pandemic, it has been harder to do all the traveling. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully.
All right, thank you. Give a round of applause, everybody.